There once lived a boy who would grow up to change the world forever, a child whose voice could make millions cry and whose feet could defy gravity itself. His name was whispered in awe across every continent, his image reflected in the eyes of billions who saw him not just as a man, but as something beyond human understanding. He was called the King of Pop, a title that barely scratched the surface of what he truly meant to the world. His story is one of pure magic mixed with deep pain, of unimaginable success shadowed by crushing loneliness, of a genius who gave everything to his art but lost pieces of himself along the way. This is not just a tale of fame and fortune, but a journey through the heart of someone who wanted nothing more than to heal the world while struggling to heal himself. From the moment he first stepped onto a stage as a little boy in Gary, Indiana, to the final curtain call that came far too soon, his life was a symphony of triumph and tragedy, of moonwalks and controversies, of record-breaking albums and heartbreaking headlines. He was loved by more people than perhaps anyone in history, yet he often felt utterly alone. He was celebrated as a god of entertainment, yet treated as something less than human by those who could not understand his uniqueness. His childhood was stolen, his adulthood scrutinized, and his legacy debated long after his last breath. But through it all, the music remained pure and powerful, a testament to a soul that refused to be silenced even when the world seemed determined to break it. This is the entire story of Michael Jackson, told from the very beginning to the very end, with nothing left out and nothing held back. Michael Joseph Jackson was born on August 29, 1958, in a small house on Jackson Street in Gary, Indiana, a city known more for its steel mills and hard times than for producing legends. He was the eighth of 10 children born to Joseph and Catherine Jackson, a family that had very little money, but an abundance of something far more valuable: talent. His father Joseph worked in a steel mill and played guitar in a local rhythm and blues band, dreaming of a music career that never quite happened for him. His mother Catherine was a devout Jehovah's Witness who filled their home with faith, love, and the sound of gospel music. The Jackson house was small and crowded, with children sharing beds and dreams that seemed too big for the tiny rooms they lived in. Gary was a tough place to grow up, with poverty pressing down on families like a heavy weight and opportunities feeling scarce as clean air in that industrial town. But inside that little house on Jackson Street, something special was brewing, something that would eventually explode into the world and change music forever. Joseph Jackson noticed early on that his children had musical gifts, and he saw in them the chance to achieve what he himself never could. He began training them rigorously, some would say brutally, pushing them to practice for hours every single day after school. Michael was only 5 years old when he joined his older brothers Jackie, Tito, German, and Marlon in what would become known as the Jackson Five. Even at that tender age, Michael stood out. His voice was not the voice of a child, but something that seemed to come from somewhere ancient and knowing, filled with emotion that no 5-year-old should be able to express. He could mimic James Brown's dance moves after watching them just once, spinning and sliding across the floor with a natural grace that left everyone who saw him absolutely stunned. His brothers were talented, but Michael was something else entirely, something that made people stop whatever they were doing just to watch and listen. The practice sessions in that Gary home were intense and often frightening for the young children. Joseph Jackson demanded perfection and did not tolerate mistakes, using his belt as motivation when he felt his sons were not giving their all. Michael would later speak about the fear he felt during those rehearsals, the way his stomach would twist into knots when he knew practice time was coming, the tears he would hide so his father would not see them as weakness. Yet those same brutal sessions were forging something extraordinary, teaching Michael discipline and dedication that would serve him throughout his entire career. Catherine Jackson tried to balance her husband's harshness with her own gentle love, encouraging her children and reminding them that God had given them these gifts for a reason. She would sing hymns while cooking in the kitchen, and Michael would absorb every note, every phrase, storing them away in his remarkable musical mind. By the time Michael was 6 years old, the Jackson Five were performing at local talent shows and small clubs around Gary and Chicago. He would play anywhere that would have them, from high school gymnasiums to small theaters to rough bars where children probably should not have been. Michael was always positioned front and center, his brothers harmonizing behind him, while he delivered lead vocals that seemed impossible coming from such a small body. Audiences could not believe what they were seeing and hearing. This little boy with the big afro and the even bigger voice could command a stage like performers 3 times his age. He would dance with energy that seemed endless, sing with passion that seemed limitless, and connect with crowds in ways that professional entertainers spent lifetimes trying to learn. People began talking about the Jackson Five, word spreading through the Midwest music scene about this family group, fronted by a child prodigy who might just be the most talented performer anyone had ever seen. Jackson Five's big break came in 1968 when they auditioned for Motown Records, the legendary Detroit label that had launched the careers of Diana Ross and the Supremes, Stevie Wonder, Marvin Gaye, and so many other icons of black music. Story goes that Diana Ross herself discovered them and brought them to Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown, though in truth it was actually Gladys Knight and Bobby Taylor who first brought the group to Motown's attention. Regardless of exactly how it happened, when Berry Gordy saw Michael Jackson perform, he knew immediately that he was witnessing something that comes along once in a generation, maybe once in a lifetime. Michael was only 10 years old, but when he sang and danced, he became ageless, channeling something pure and powerful that Gordy recognized as the kind of magic that could not be taught or manufactured. Motown signed the Jackson 5 in March of 1969, and the family packed up and moved from Gary to Los Angeles, California, leaving behind the steel mills and small houses for the bright lights and big opportunities of Hollywood. Michael's childhood, what little remained of it, was essentially over from that moment forward. The Jackson 5 were molded by Motown's star-making machine, given the best producers, the best songwriters, the best choreographers, and the best publicity that money could buy. Berry Gordy invested heavily in the group, sensing that he had something truly special on his hands. The boys were given stylish matching outfits, their hair was shaped into perfect afros, and they were taught how to move in synchronized perfection, while Michael led from the front with his impossible voice and magnetic stage presence. In October of 1969, the Jackson 5 released their first single on Motown, a song called I Want You Back that would change their lives forever. The song was an instant smash hit, shooting to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart and selling over 6 million copies worldwide. Michael's lead vocals on the track were joyful and urgent, his voice soaring over the infectious melody, while his brothers provided the tight harmonies that made the song irresistible. Suddenly, the Jackson 5 were everywhere, on television shows, on radio stations, on the covers of teen magazines, their faces becoming as familiar to American audiences as any of the biggest stars in the country. What made it even more remarkable was that Michael was still just 11 years old, a sixth grader who should have been worried about homework and playground games, but instead was worrying about concert performances and recording sessions. Hits kept coming one after another in a streak that seemed almost unbelievable. ABC followed I Want You Back to #1 in April of 1970. Then The Love You Save hit #1 in June, and I'll Be There reached the top spot in October of the same year. Jackson 5 became the first group in music history to have their first 4 singles all reach #1, a record that spoke to just how powerful and popular they had become in such a short time. Michael was the undisputed star of the group, the one that cameras always found, the one that girls screamed for the loudest, the one whose voice carried the emotion that made the songs connect so deeply with listeners. He was living a life that most adults could barely handle, performing in massive arenas, appearing on national television shows, being mobbed by fans wherever he went, all while still being young enough that he should have been playing with toys and riding bicycles. But behind the smiles and the success, Michael was struggling with the loss of his childhood. While other kids his age were going to school dances and birthday parties, Michael was in recording studios and on tour buses. He would later talk about how he would watch children playing in parks from the windows of hotel rooms and limousines, feeling an ache in his chest for the normal childhood he could never have. He was tutored by teachers hired by Motown, rather than attending regular school with kids his own age, meaning he had no real friends outside of his brothers and the adults who worked for the group. His father Joseph continued to be a demanding and often frightening presence, pushing the boys harder as they became more successful, never satisfied with their achievements, always insisting they could do better. Michael craved his father's approval, but rarely received it, leading to feelings of inadequacy that would haunt him for his entire life despite becoming one of the most successful entertainers in human history. As the 1970s progressed, Michael Jackson continued to evolve as an artist while remaining part of the Jackson 5. Later renamed simply the Jacksons, when they left Motown for Epic Records in 1975. He began to develop his own artistic vision, wanting more control over the music and the creative direction of his career. In 1971, while still only 13 years old, Michael released his first solo single, Got to Be There, which became a top 5 hit and showed that he could succeed on his own just as powerfully as he could with his brothers. More solo hits followed, including Rockin', Robin, and Ben, a tender ballad about a rat that became Michael's first #1 solo single in 1972. Song Ben revealed something important about Michael's artistry, his ability to find humanity and emotion in unexpected places, to make listeners care about subjects that others might dismiss or ignore. Throughout his teenage years, Michael struggled with his changing appearance, particularly the acne that plagued his skin and made him deeply self-conscious. He would later admit that he hated looking in mirrors during this time, that he felt ugly and unlovable despite being adored by millions of fans around the world. His father Joseph made cruel comments about Michael's appearance, calling him names that cut deep into the young performer's fragile self-esteem. These wounds would never fully heal, leading to decades of cosmetic procedures and an obsession with physical perfection that seemed to intensify as Michael's fame grew larger. He was also dealing with the confusion and awkwardness of puberty while living under constant public scrutiny, his voice changing from the crystal-clear boy soprano that had made him famous to a softer adult tenor that required him to adjust his singing technique completely. In 1978, Michael landed his first major acting role in the movie, The Wiz, an all-black adaptation of The Wizard of Oz, in which he played the Scarecrow alongside Diana Ross's Dorothy. film was not a commercial success, but it proved to be one of the most important experiences of Michael's life for one crucial reason. It introduced him to Quincy Jones, the legendary producer who was working on the film's music. Michael and Quincy connected immediately, recognizing in each other a shared obsession with perfection and a vision for what popular music could become. Quincy saw in Michael not just a talented performer, but a serious artist with unlimited potential, someone willing to work as hard as necessary to create something truly special. Michael saw in Quincy a mentor and father figure who treated him with respect rather than fear, who encouraged his ideas rather than dismissing them, who believed in his ability to be more than just a child star trying to maintain relevance. This partnership between Michael Jackson and Quincy Jones would produce 3 albums that changed popular music forever, starting with Off the Wall in 1979. Michael was 20 years old when Off the Wall was released, and the album represented his full emergence as an adult artist capable of sophisticated soul, funk, disco, and pop music that appealed to audiences of all ages and backgrounds. The album produced 4 top 10 singles including Don't Stop, Till You Get Enough, and Rock With You, both of which showcased Michael's maturing voice and his incredible ability to inhabit a song completely, making every word and every note feel essential and true. Off the Wall sold over 20 million copies worldwide and earned Michael his first Grammy Award, proving that he was no longer just a former child star, but a major force in contemporary music. Despite the massive success of Off the Wall, Michael felt disappointed when the album did not receive the Album of the Year Grammy, convinced that he had created something worthy of that honor. This disappointment fueled his determination to create something even bigger, even better, something that could not be ignored or dismissed by the music industry establishment. He began envisioning an album that would break every record, cross every boundary, unite every audience, an album that would make him the biggest star in the world. That vision would soon become reality in ways that exceeded even Michael's wildest dreams. In 1982, Michael Jackson released Thriller, an album that would go on to become the best-selling album of all time, a record it still holds decades later with over 70 million copies sold worldwide. Those numbers, as staggering as they are, cannot fully capture what Thriller meant and what it accomplished. The album was not just successful, it was a cultural phenomenon that transcended music itself, breaking down racial barriers on radio and television, revolutionizing the music video format, and elevating Michael Jackson from superstar to something approaching a living myth. Every single aspect of Thriller was crafted with meticulous attention to detail, from the songwriting to the production to the performances to the visuals, creating a complete artistic statement that appealed to rock fans and soul fans and pop fans and dance fans all at once. Thriller produced an unprecedented 7 top 10 singles on the Billboard Hot 100 chart, including The Girl Is Mine, Billie Jean, Beat It, Wanna Be Startin' Something, Human Nature, PYT, and the title track Thriller. Each of these songs was distinctly different from the others, showcasing Michael's versatility and his refusal to be pigeonholed into any single genre or style. Billie Jean was a dark, mysterious funk masterpiece built on one of the most iconic bass lines in music history, with Michael's vocal performance alternating between vulnerable and defiant, as he told a story of false accusations and paranoia. Beat It was a rock song featuring a blistering guitar solo by Eddie Van Halen, proving that Michael could cross over into rock radio and rock culture just as successfully as he dominated pop and R&B. Thriller itself was a mini-horror movie set to music, with a spoken-word section by horror legend Vincent Price and a narrative structure that went far beyond typical pop songs. But what truly set Thriller apart and cemented its place in history were the music videos, particularly the ones for Billie Jean, Beat It, and Thriller. Before Michael Jackson, music videos were often simple performance clips or low-budget promotional tools that record labels begrudgingly produced. Michael transformed music videos into an art form, creating elaborate short films with cinematic production values, complex choreography, and storytelling that enhanced and expanded the songs rather than simply illustrating them. Billie Jean video featured Michael performing his now legendary moonwalk for the first time on television during the Motown 25th anniversary special in 1983, a moment that stopped the world and created one of the most replicated and celebrated dance moves of all time. Beat It video featured elaborate gang choreography that transformed street violence into artistic expression, with hundreds of dancers moving in perfect synchronization in a way that had never been seen before in a music video. The Thriller video, which premiered in December 1983, was on another level entirely. Running nearly 14 minutes long, directed by John Landis, who had made An American Werewolf in London, the Thriller video was genuinely cinematic, featuring state-of-the-art makeup and special effects that showed Michael transforming into a werewolf, and then into a zombie leading an army of the undead through elaborate choreography. The video cost $500,000 to produce, an unheard-of sum for a music video at the time, and MTV played it constantly, helping the channel itself become a cultural force while simultaneously showcasing Michael's genius for visual storytelling. Thriller video was so popular that it was released as a home video that sold over 1 million copies, making it the best-selling music video of all time and proving that Michael Jackson could break records in every format and medium he touched. Michael's success with Thriller made him the first black artist to receive heavy rotation on MTV, breaking down racial barriers that had kept black artists largely excluded from the channel despite their musical talents. MTV had been reluctant to play videos by black artists, claiming they were a rock channel and that black music did not fit their format, a transparent excuse that was really about racism and narrow-minded thinking about what their white suburban audience supposedly wanted. Thriller was so undeniably massive, so obviously important, that MTV had no choice but to play Michael's videos constantly, and in doing so they opened the door for other black artists and helped begin the slow process of integrating popular music in ways that had not been possible before. Michael was proud of this achievement, knowing that he had not just succeeded for himself, but had helped create opportunities for other artists who looked like him. At the 1984 Grammy Awards, Michael Jackson won a record-breaking 8 Grammy Awards in a single night, including Album of the Year for Thriller, sweeping nearly every category he was nominated in, and cementing his status as the dominant force in popular music. He appeared at the ceremony wearing his now iconic sequined glove and military-style jacket, looking both regal and otherworldly, accepting his awards with a shy humility that seemed almost impossible given the magnitude of his achievements. The world had never seen anything quite like what Michael Jackson had accomplished with Thriller, and it seemed clear that he had reached a peak that might never be matched by any artist in any genre ever again. After Thriller, Michael Jackson was no longer just a musician or even just a superstar. He had become something closer to a myth, a figure who seemed to exist on a different plane than ordinary human beings. Children wanted to be him, adults wanted to understand him, and everyone wanted to be near him, to touch him, to have some connection to his magic. He was mobbed wherever he went, with fans fainting at the sight of him, crying uncontrollably when he passed by, pressing against police barriers and security guards just to get close enough to maybe catch his eye for a fraction of a second. Michael's fame had grown so large that it became its own kind of prison, making it impossible for him to live anything resembling a normal life. He could not go to a store, could not walk down a street, could not sit in a restaurant without being surrounded by crowds that made normal existence impossible. In response to this overwhelming fame, Michael began to retreat further and further into himself and into the fantasy world he was creating at his home, which he would eventually name Neverland Ranch. He bought the property in 1988, a sprawling estate in Santa Barbara County, California, that he transformed into his own private amusement park, complete with a zoo, a movie theater, amusement park rides including a Ferris wheel and bumper cars, and carnival games. He filled Neverland with the things he had been denied as a child: innocence, fun, freedom from adult responsibilities and expectations. The ranch became his sanctuary, the one place where he felt he could be himself without judgment, where he could dress however he wanted, act however he felt, and surround himself with the childhood magic that had been stolen from him when he became famous at such a young age. Michael's appearance was changing dramatically during the 1980s, and the changes sparked endless speculation, fascination, and eventually cruel mockery from the media and the public. His skin was noticeably lighter, his nose was thinner, his overall appearance was becoming increasingly different from the young man who had appeared on the cover of Thriller just a few years earlier. Michael claimed that he had vitiligo, a skin condition that causes loss of pigmentation, and that he used makeup to even out the blotches that resulted from the disease. He also admitted to having plastic surgery on his nose, though he minimized the extent of the work he had done, claiming it was just 2 rhinoplasty procedures, when many observers suspected there had been significantly more alterations. The truth of Michael's physical transformation remains debated even today, but what cannot be debated is the pain that his changing appearance caused him, and the way the media turned his personal struggles into public entertainment. In 1985, Michael made headlines when he purchased the publishing rights to the Beatles catalog for $47.5 million, a business move that was brilliant financially, but that damaged his friendship with Paul McCartney, who had wanted to buy the catalog himself and felt betrayed that Michael had outbid him. Purchase showed that Michael was not just a performer, but a savvy businessman who understood that owning music publishing could generate income for decades to come. It also showed his determination to build wealth that would allow him to maintain his independence and his artistic freedom, not having to rely on record labels or managers or anyone else to support his vision and his lifestyle. Michael followed up Thriller with the album Bad in 1987, and while any other artist would have been thrilled with its success, for Michael it felt like a disappointment because it did not match the absolutely unprecedented success of Thriller. Bad sold over 35 million copies worldwide and produced 5 #1 singles, including I Just Can't Stop Loving You, Bad, The Way You Make Me Feel, Man in the Mirror, and Dirty Diana, making Michael the first artist ever to have 5 #1 hits from a single album. Bad World Tour ran from 1987 to 1989, with Michael performing 123 concerts to over 4.4 million fans, breaking attendance records and grossing over $125 million. Tour showcased Michael's evolution as a live performer, with increasingly elaborate staging, pyrotechnics, costume changes, and choreography that required absolute precision from Michael and his dancers. But no matter how successful Bad was by objective standards, it existed in the shadow of Thriller, and Michael felt the pressure of having set a standard that might be impossible to surpass. Media began to focus less on his music and more on his eccentricities, his changing appearance, his reclusive lifestyle, and the increasingly strange stories that emerged about his behavior. He was photographed sleeping in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, which his publicist claimed was an attempt to live to 150 years old, a story that was actually planted by Michael's own team to generate publicity, but that backfired by making him seem bizarre and disconnected from reality. He was rumored to have tried to buy the bones of the Elephant Man, John Merrick, another story that was exaggerated, but that contained a grain of truth in that Michael felt a kinship with Merrick, a man who had been treated as a freak because of his appearance, but who had possessed a gentle soul and a yearning for acceptance and love. In 1991, Michael released Dangerous, his first album without Quincy Jones as producer, working instead with Teddy Riley and other producers on an album that incorporated new jack swing and hip-hop influences while maintaining Michael's pop sensibilities. The album debuted at number 1 and eventually sold over 32 million copies worldwide, with hit singles including Black or White, Remember the Time, In the Closet, and Heal the World. The music video for Black or White was a massive event, premiering simultaneously in 27 countries to an estimated audience of 500 million people, making it one of the most watched television events in history. The video featured groundbreaking morphing technology that transformed faces of different races into one another, supporting the song's message of racial harmony and unity. However, the video's ending featured Michael violently smashing car windows and grabbing his crotch in ways that many viewers found disturbing and inappropriate, forcing Michael to edit the video and apologize for imagery that he claimed was artistic expression, but that many interpreted as gratuitous and offensive. Dangerous World Tour ran from 1992 to 1993 and was even more elaborate than the Bad Tour, with Michael performing 69 concerts that were seen by 3.5 million fans. But the tour was cut short in November 1993 when accusations of child sexual abuse were made against Michael by a 13-year-old boy named Jordan Chandler. Allegations exploded into the biggest scandal of Michael's career and arguably the most damaging event of his entire life. Jordan Chandler's father, a dentist named Evan Chandler, claimed that Michael had molested his son during sleepovers at Neverland Ranch and in other locations where Michael had spent time with the boy. The accusations shocked the world, dividing public opinion between those who believed Michael was a predator who had used his fame to gain access to children, and those who believed he was an innocent man being extorted by a family seeking money from a wealthy celebrity. Michael vehemently denied the allegations, claiming he would never harm a child and that his relationships with children were pure and innocent, born from his own desire to recapture the childhood he had lost. He pointed out that he had spent time with hundreds of children over the years through his charity work and his personal life, and that singling out these accusations from one family seemed suspicious and financially motivated. Indeed, Evan Chandler had approached Michael's representatives seeking $20 million before going public with the accusations, suggesting that this was more about extortion than justice. However, Michael's insistence on sleeping in the same bed with children, even if he claimed nothing sexual occurred, struck many people as inappropriate at best and potentially predatory at worst, regardless of his insistence that his intentions were innocent. Stress of the accusations and the media firestorm that followed caused Michael to become dependent on prescription painkillers, which he had originally started taking for legitimate pain from injuries sustained during performances and from the various cosmetic procedures he had undergone. His addiction grew worse as the scandal intensified, and in November 1993, he announced that he was canceling the remainder of the Dangerous Tour and entering rehabilitation for painkiller addiction. He released a statement via satellite from his treatment facility, looking gaunt and exhausted, proclaiming his innocence while admitting that he had become dependent on medication to cope with the pressure and pain he was experiencing. The statement was heartbreaking to watch, showing a man who seemed to be falling apart under the weight of accusations and scrutiny that would have crushed almost anyone. In January 1994, Michael settled the civil lawsuit with the Chandler family for a reported $23 million, a decision that many of his supporters criticized because they felt it made him look guilty, even though he maintained his innocence. Michael's lawyers argued that settling was the only way to move forward and focus on his career and his life rather than spending years in court battling accusations that would be impossible to definitively disprove, given that they involved events with no witnesses beyond Michael and the accuser. Settlement did not prevent criminal charges from being filed, but the Santa Barbara County District Attorney's Office decided not to prosecute after Jordan Chandler refused to testify in a criminal trial following the civil settlement. The accusations left permanent damage to Michael's reputation and his psyche, creating a cloud of suspicion that would never fully dissipate and that would color how many people viewed him for the rest of his life and beyond. In May 1994, in a move that shocked the world, Michael Jackson married Lisa Marie Presley, the daughter of Elvis Presley, in a secret ceremony in the Dominican Republic. Marriage seemed almost too perfect to be real, uniting the king of pop with the daughter of the king of rock and roll, creating a tabloid dream that generated endless speculation about whether the relationship was genuine or a publicity stunt designed to rehabilitate Michael's image after the child abuse allegations. Lisa Marie insisted that she genuinely loved Michael and that their relationship was real, not a business arrangement or a scheme. She claimed that she saw beyond the public persona to the vulnerable, sweet man underneath, someone who needed love and protection from a world that had become hostile and suspicious toward him. Marriage was troubled from the start, with Michael's family reportedly opposing it, and Lisa Marie struggling to deal with Michael's increasing isolation, his dependence on medication, and his refusal to live anything resembling a conventional married life. They made awkward public appearances together, including a cringe-inducing kiss at the 1994 MTV Video Music Awards that looked staged and uncomfortable, fueling speculation that the relationship was not authentic. Lisa Marie later said that Michael had promised to have children with her, and that his failure to follow through on that promise was one of the factors that led to their divorce in January 1996, less than 2 years after they married. She would speak in later years about her genuine feelings for Michael and her sadness that she could not save him from the demons and the hangers-on that surrounded him and enabled his worst impulses. In 1995, Michael released the double album HI Story, Past, Present, and Future, Book I, which included a greatest hits disc and a disc of new material. New songs reflected Michael's anger and pain over the abuse allegations and the media treatment he had endured, with tracks like Scream, a duet with his sister Janet that railed against media intrusion. They Don't Care About Us, which dealt with themes of oppression and injustice, but landed Michael in controversy over lyrics that some Jewish groups found anti-Semitic, forcing him to re-record the song with altered lyrics. The album's promotional campaign was grandiose even by Michael's standards, with a 9-minute teaser video featuring military imagery and statues of Michael being erected in cities around the world, presenting him as a leader and a martyr being persecuted by forces that wanted to destroy him. Many critics found the campaign to be megalomaniacal and tone-deaf, a sign that Michael had lost touch with reality and saw himself as something far grander than a pop star. HI Story sold over 20 million copies worldwide, impressive numbers that nonetheless represented a significant decline from Michael's previous albums, and suggested that the accusations and controversies were taking a toll on his commercial appeal. HI Story World Tour ran from 1996 to 1997, with Michael performing 82 concerts to nearly 4.5 million fans, proving that he still had a massive global audience willing to pay to see him perform despite the scandals. Behind the scenes, Michael's life was increasingly chaotic, with his finances becoming precarious despite his earnings, largely because of his extravagant spending on Neverland Ranch, his enormous staff, his art collection, and his general lifestyle that involved spending money as if it would never run out. November 1996, Michael married Debbie Rowe, a nurse who had worked for his dermatologist and who agreed to have children with him. Their relationship was unusual from the start, with Debbie later describing it more as a friendship and a business arrangement than a traditional marriage. She gave birth to Michael's first child, Prince Michael Jackson Jr., in February 1997, and to a daughter, Paris Michael Catherine Jackson, in April 1998. Michael was reportedly overjoyed to become a father, seeing his children as his greatest accomplishment and his opportunity to give them the childhood he never had. However, his marriage to Debbie Rowe ended in 1999, with Rowe agreeing to give Michael full custody of the children in exchange for a reported $8 million settlement, an arrangement that once again raised questions about the nature of Michael's relationships and his approach to family. In 2001, Michael released Invincible, his final studio album of new material, which was released with massive promotion and high expectations, but ultimately became viewed as a commercial disappointment despite debuting at #1 and selling over 10 million copies worldwide. The album featured songs like You Rock My World, Butterflies, and Cry, but it lacked the cultural impact and the overwhelming success of Michael's earlier work. Michael blamed Sony Music for not promoting the album adequately, engaging in a very public feud with Sony executive Tommy Mottola, whom Michael called racist and devilish during bizarre public appearances where he wore red armbands and held up protest signs. Conflict with Sony showed how much Michael's relationship with the music industry had deteriorated and how paranoid he had become about the people around him and the companies he worked with. Michael's financial situation was becoming increasingly dire despite his continued earning power. He had borrowed hundreds of millions of dollars using his stake in the Sony/ATV music publishing catalog as collateral, and his spending continued to far outpace his income. Neverland Ranch alone cost an estimated $5 million per year to maintain, with its staff of over 150 people and its menagerie of exotic animals that required constant care and feeding. Michael refused to cut back on his lifestyle or to sell assets that could have eased his financial pressure, seemingly unable to accept that his spending was unsustainable and that his peak earning years were behind him. His advisors came and went, with many becoming frustrated by Michael's refusal to listen to their advice or to make the difficult decisions necessary to stabilize his finances. In 2002, Michael caused international outrage when he briefly dangled his infant son, Prince Michael Jackson II, nicknamed Blanket, over a fourth-floor balcony railing at a hotel in Berlin, Germany, holding the baby by one arm while fans below screamed in horror. Michael later apologized, calling it a terrible mistake made in the excitement of wanting to show his son to his fans. But the incident reinforced the perception that Michael's judgment was severely impaired and that his children might not be safe in his care. Image of the baby dangling over the balcony was broadcast around the world, becoming one of the most shocking and criticized moments of Michael's entire career, and providing ammunition to those who believed he was unfit as a parent. In 2003, Michael participated in a documentary by British journalist Martin Bashir called Living with Michael Jackson, which was supposed to be an opportunity for Michael to show the world his life at Neverland and to present himself as a misunderstood but caring father and human being. Instead, the documentary became a disaster for Michael's reputation. He admitted on camera to sharing his bed with children, insisting it was innocent and beautiful, and that people who found it inappropriate were the ones with dirty minds. He held hands with a young cancer survivor named Gavin Arvizo and discussed their close friendship, with Gavin appearing on camera saying that Michael had never done anything inappropriate. The optics were terrible, with many viewers finding Michael's behavior deeply disturbing and his justifications bizarre and unconvincing. Just months after the Martin Bashir documentary aired, Gavin Arvizo, the same boy who had defended Michael in the film, became the center of new child molestation allegations against Michael Jackson. In November 2003, Santa Barbara County officials raided Neverland Ranch with over 70 police officers, searching for evidence that Michael had molested Gavin and had given him alcohol, which California law treated as a serious crime when done by an adult to a minor. Michael was arrested and charged with 7 counts of child molestation and 2 counts of administering an intoxicating agent, charges that carried a potential sentence of nearly 20 years in prison if convicted on all counts. Michael posted $3 million bail and was released, but he faced the prospect of a criminal trial that could end with him spending the rest of his life in prison. The case went to trial in January 2005, with the proceedings broadcast to the world and dissected endlessly by legal experts and commentators. The prosecution argued that Michael was a predator who had used his fame and his fantasy ranch to lure in vulnerable children, grooming them and their families before molesting them and intimidating them into silence. They presented the Arvizo family as victims who had been manipulated and abused by a powerful celebrity who thought he was above the law. Defense argued that the Arvizo family was a group of con artists who had a history of making false accusations and seeking money from celebrities, pointing out inconsistencies in their stories, and presenting witnesses who testified that the family had praised Michael even after the alleged abuse supposedly occurred. The trial lasted 5 months and was a media circus, with fans and protesters gathering outside the courthouse every day Michael appeared, some supporting him and others condemning him. Michael arrived at court each day dressed in elaborate outfits, sometimes in pajama bottoms after reportedly being late because of a back injury, looking increasingly frail and exhausted as the trial wore on. Testimony was often graphic and disturbing, with prosecution witnesses describing alleged sexual acts and alcohol consumption, while defense witnesses attacked the credibility of the Arvizo family and painted them as liars motivated by greed. Michael's past settlement with the Chandler family was not admissible as evidence, but it hung over the proceedings nonetheless, with many people believing that if Michael had settled once, it suggested guilt that made these new allegations more credible. In June 2005, after deliberating for about 32 hours over 7 days, the jury returned not guilty verdicts on all 14 counts, acquitting Michael Jackson completely. Michael's fans erupted in celebration, seeing the verdict as vindication and proof that their hero had been the victim of a malicious prosecution and a scheming family. Michael's family expressed relief and gratitude, with his mother Catherine saying she had never doubted her son's innocence. But Michael himself seemed broken by the experience, the trial having taken a terrible toll on his health, his finances, and his spirit. He had been facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison, and even though he had been acquitted, the accusations and the trial had reinforced the suspicions that many people had harbored about him for years. After the trial, Michael left the United States and spent time in Bahrain, Ireland, and other locations, essentially going into exile from the country that had once celebrated him as its greatest entertainer. He rarely performed, rarely recorded, and rarely appeared in public, becoming almost a ghost of his former self. His financial problems continued to mount, with Neverland Ranch going into foreclosure and Michael owing millions of dollars to various creditors and former employees who sued him for unpaid wages. The ranch that had once represented his dreams and his escape from the pressures of fame became just another symbol of his decline and his inability to maintain the empire he had built. In 2009, Michael Jackson announced that he would be performing a series of comeback concerts at the Otwo Arena in London, a residency called This Is It that was originally planned for 10 shows, but expanded to 50 shows due to overwhelming demand. Tickets sold out in hours, with fans around the world desperate to see Michael perform live one more time, hoping that he still possessed the magic that had made him the greatest entertainer of all time. Michael threw himself into rehearsals for the shows, working with a team of dancers, musicians, and technical experts to create a spectacular production that would remind the world of his genius. Those who worked with him during the rehearsals later said that he was excited and engaged, that his voice was strong, and his dancing was sharp, that he seemed determined to prove that he still had what it took to command a stage. But behind the scenes, Michael was struggling with chronic insomnia and pain, and he had hired a personal physician named Conrad Murray to help him sleep using powerful prescription drugs. Murray was administering propofol, a surgical anesthetic that is normally only used in hospital settings, giving Michael nightly infusions to knock him out so he could get the rest his body desperately needed. This was an extraordinarily dangerous practice, with propofol requiring constant monitoring because it can stop breathing if administered improperly. But Michael was desperate for sleep, and Murray was willing to do what Michael wanted, either out of genuine desire to help or out of desire to keep collecting the $150,000 per month that Michael was paying him. On June 25, 2009, just weeks before the This Is It concerts were scheduled to begin, Michael Jackson died at his rented mansion in Los Angeles at the age of 50 years old. Conrad Murray had given him propofol the night before, and when Murray left the room to make phone calls, Michael stopped breathing. Murray's attempts at CPR were inadequate, and his delay in calling 911 meant that by the time paramedics arrived, Michael could not be revived. He was pronounced dead at UCLA Medical Center at 2:26 in the afternoon, and within minutes the news was spreading across the world, stunning billions of people who could not believe that the king of pop was gone. Reaction to Michael's death was overwhelming, with fans gathering at his family's home, at Neverland Ranch, at the Apollo Theater in New York, and at landmarks around the world to mourn and to celebrate his life. Memorials were held in cities on every continent, with people of all ages and all backgrounds coming together to share their grief and their memories of how Michael's music had touched their lives. The internet essentially broke under the weight of traffic as people searched for information and shared their shock and sadness. Radio stations around the world played Michael's music nonstop, and his albums shot back to the top of the charts as millions of people sought to reconnect with his artistry in the wake of his death. Michael's memorial service was held on July 7, 2009, at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, with over 17,000 people in attendance and an estimated 2.5 to 3 billion people watching worldwide, making it one of the most-watched events in television history. Service featured performances and tributes from Stevie Wonder, Lionel Richie, John Mayer, Jennifer Hudson, Usher, and many others, with Michael's brothers serving as pallbearers and his daughter Paris giving a brief, heartbreaking statement where she tearfully told the world that her father was the best father anyone could imagine and that she would miss him forever. The service was both a celebration of Michael's achievements and a mourning of the loss of someone who had given so much to the world, but who had seemed so troubled and so lonely despite being surrounded by millions of admirers. Conrad Murray was charged with involuntary manslaughter for his role in Michael's death, and after a trial in 2011, he was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in prison, though he served only 2 years before being released. Murray maintained that Michael had somehow administered additional propofol to himself while Murray was out of the room, essentially blaming Michael for his own death, a claim that many found offensive and self-serving. Regardless of exactly how the final dose was administered, it was clear that Murray had been engaged in grossly negligent medical practice, and that his actions had directly led to Michael's death, depriving the world of more years with an artist who still had music to make and stories to tell. Michael Jackson's story does not end with his death, because his influence and his music continue to live on, touching new generations and maintaining relevance in ways that most artists can only dream of achieving. His albums still sell millions of copies, his videos still get millions of views, his dance moves are still imitated by performers around the world, and his songs still play at parties and weddings and celebrations everywhere. He changed popular music in ways that are so fundamental that we sometimes forget how much we owe to his innovations. From the modern music video format, to the integration of complex choreography into pop performances, to the breaking down of racial barriers in mainstream media. He proved that a black artist could be the biggest star in the world, selling more albums and commanding bigger audiences than anyone regardless of their race, paving the way for every black pop star who came after him. But Michael's legacy is complicated by the allegations and the controversies that surrounded him, by the questions about his relationships with children and his physical transformation and his increasingly erratic behavior. Some people cannot separate the art from the artist, cannot enjoy Billie Jean or Thriller without thinking about the accusations and the strangeness and the tragic ending. Others insist that Michael was innocent, that he was persecuted by a media that built him up only to tear him down, that he was a gentle soul who was misunderstood and exploited by people seeking money and fame through association with him. Truth probably lies somewhere in between, in the complicated reality of a man who was simultaneously a genius and a deeply troubled person, someone capable of creating transcendent art while also making terrible decisions that harmed himself and possibly others. What cannot be disputed is the joy that Michael's music brought to billions of people, the way his songs and performances made people feel alive and connected to something larger than themselves. His humanitarian work often gets overlooked in discussions of his legacy, but he donated hundreds of millions of dollars to charities over his lifetime, supporting children's hospitals, AIDS research, disaster relief, and countless other causes. He used his platform to promote messages of racial harmony, environmental protection, and global unity, even when those messages sometimes got lost in the controversies and the spectacle that surrounded him. He genuinely seemed to care about making the world a better place, even as his own world was falling apart around him. Michael Jackson was a child prodigy who became the biggest star on the planet, a performer who could make stadiums full of people move as one, a songwriter and producer who created some of the most memorable and beloved music of the 20th century. He was also a deeply wounded person who never recovered from the childhood that was taken from him, who spent his entire adult life trying to recapture innocence while being unable to escape the pressures and the suspicions that came with his level of fame. He wanted to be loved by everyone, but seemed incapable of accepting that love when it was offered, always suspecting ulterior motives, and always feeling alone even when surrounded by people. He built Neverland Ranch as a monument to the childhood he lost, but it became a monument to his isolation and his inability to live in the real world with real relationships and real responsibilities. The manner of his death, alone in a bedroom with a doctor administering dangerous drugs to help him sleep, seems almost like a cruel metaphor for his entire life. A person who had everything the world could offer, but who could not find peace, who had entertained billions, but who could not quiet his own mind enough to rest naturally. His children, who are now adults, have spoken about their father with love and have worked to preserve his legacy while also living their own lives outside of his massive shadow. They remember him as a devoted father who wanted the best for them, who protected them from the media, who gave them as normal a childhood as was possible given who he was. They do not remember the king of pop, but instead remember their dad, the man who read them stories and played with them, and loved them fiercely even when the rest of the world was pulling him in 1,000 different directions. Michael Jackson remains one of the most fascinating and controversial figures in entertainment history, a person who achieved heights that seemed impossible while also descending into depths that seemed avoidable. His music continues to inspire and to move people. His performances continue to be studied and emulated, and his influence continues to be felt in every corner of popular culture. Whether you view him as a misunderstood genius, a tragic victim, a dangerous predator, or some combination of all of these things, there is no denying that he was one of the most significant cultural figures of the 20th century, and that his impact will be felt for generations to come. He wanted to heal the world through his music, and while he could not save himself, perhaps his art continues to heal others, continues to bring joy and inspiration to people who need it, continues to remind us that magic is possible, even in a world that often seems dark and broken. That may be the truest and most important part of his legacy, the part that survives all the controversies and all the questions and all the sadness, the simple fact that Michael Jackson made people feel something powerful and real, and that feeling does not die even when the person who created it is gone.